Hey there everybody, it's markcrilley. I'm back with another video. Now you know that I love doing challenge videos. Well, today I've come up with a new one. I'm calling it the 2D becomes 3D challenge. And what it involves is making a drawing where part of the drawing is very, very flat, two-dimensional. And then the other part of it, you basically try to make it as 3D looking as you possibly can. And I'll be talking more about the various aspects of this challenge as we go along. But for now, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so you can see I've drawn a sort of Chinese-style dragon here, and this is not a video about how to draw such a dragon. If you want me to do such a video, let me know in the comment section. I could certainly do one, but I have chosen this design just as a subject for the purpose of this challenge, with my idea, as I said, being to make the drawing very, very flat over here, very, very three-dimensional looking over here, and then to sort of manage the transition between those two styles along the way there in the middle. And I'm going to go ahead and begin doing some inking here, and I have detached the paper from the desk, which is maybe a little different from what I normally do, but I find that to do proper inking, I need to be able to work with the natural pivot point of my wrist. And I will soon be switching back to the time-lapse approach, but I thought I'd take a moment and do just a little bit of real-time inking here to explain what my concept is. Generally speaking, when you put a very strong, bold, black outline around something that you illustrate, you do tend to flatten it out. And the more visible, the thicker that line is, the sort of flatter the illustration appears. And that's really exactly what I want for the purposes of contrast in this illustration. In fact, I'm not even going to do any coloring. It's going to be fully just black lines over here in this section. And then as I get closer to the middle of the drawing, I'm going to have these lines get increasingly thinner and more like spidery until they trail off and disappear altogether, so that when I get over here, everything is going to be illustrated by way of tones and shades and shadows. And of course, you know, we're always seeing these two different types of illustrations in our daily lives, which is to say, some trying really hard to appear three-dimensional. The French called it trompe-l'œil, fooling the eye in a way, and trying to make something look so real that you feel like if you put your fingers down, you would be able to touch the surface of it. We see that type of drawing fairly frequently, and then we're also seeing this type of deliberately flat, kind of more graphic design-based approach over here. But it's pretty unusual to see the two styles together in the same drawing, and that's why I thought that this would be a fun kind of challenge. And I do sincerely hope that other people will be inspired to take it on. But for now, let's go ahead and continue inking. I'm going to do all of the inking that I intend to do on this illustration, and you're going to see the gradual change from these super thick lines over here to, as I said, thinner lines that will trail off somewhere around the middle. Alright, so I've reached the point where I can move from the inking part of the drawing to this part where I want it to look a little more three-dimensional. But before I do that, I'm going to take a kneaded eraser and get rid of the initial pencil guidelines completely in this area, because I don't want them to show through at all. I want this to almost look like a stamp or something, or a tattoo. deliberately simplified line work. Then over here, I'm not going to completely erase it away, but I'm going to try to lighten up these lines, because the tool that I'm going to use for, or the art supply that I'm going to use for adding color, is going to be watercolor. Now, when you use watercolor on top of pencil lines, it tends to set those pencil lines into the paper. It's sort of like the pencil lines are behind the watercolor that you added on top of them, and then you can't get rid of that line work. It's too late. So if you want to try to achieve some of the effects that I'm doing here today, I would advise you to consider lightening up the lines in the part of the drawing. If indeed you're going to use either watercolor or even markers, I think would tend to set the pencil lines into the page and make them unerasable. But I'm going to switch now to a kind of very light gray watercolor, and the trick is going to be to sort of decide where I apply it and where it begins to fade away. So I'm going in here. I'm going to add, I feel like this middle section here can be where the color begins to intensify. I'd like to, if possible, have it really blur away to the white of the page. And I guess what I'll do is when I get over to this section, I will try to get rid of what's left of the color and just use a little water here to create a gradient fade until we have no color at all. And I'm even using a bit of tissue here to dab that away. So you can see how I tried to have this fade from a mid-gray to like the white of the page. Now I'm going to kind of just create a base layer of color here that I can add on top of later on. I can see again that I'm going to have to switch into time-lapse to do an awful lot of the different techniques that I'm going to do as this video proceeds, but I wanted to at least explain why. Why am I erasing things? Why am I adding this base layer? Indeed, I haven't really explained that. My idea is if something is supposed to look three-dimensional, in this case I almost want it to look like it was carved out of wood. To me that means getting a single solid area of color at the bottom of everything to make this part of the illustration seem more solid later on. You know, you don't want any white of the page, or I don't want any white of the page showing through in this part of the drawing, and my goal is to make it indeed appear to pop up off the page. So that's what my thinking is here in terms of adding this what I keep calling a base layer of gray watercolor. Well, I think that probably tells you everything you need to know about that. I'm going to go ahead and what you're going to see me do now in time-lapse is finish up this base layer of gray and then probably begin to refine things a little bit once that has dried with a smaller brush and sort of a secondary layer. I suppose before I get too far into that part of it, I should stop and come back and give some pointers and so forth. But let's go ahead and kick it into time-lapse. Bring in old man time-lapse. Oh, I do love Chinese dragons. So beautiful. And he's going to help me speed through the next part of this process, and we'll be back soon to give you a few more pointers. Alright, so I've decided to tape the illustration down once again. I don't really require the pivot point of my wrist so much as I did for the inking, I don't think. And so I'm coming back in here with a smaller brush, but the same kind of watery gray wash that's going to help me begin to make some shadows here in the middle. Now the challenge I'm finding is that as I do a transition from completely flat towards more 3D looking. I've got to be careful about, you know, where do I add these little bits of extra shadow? How do I have it trail off until there are no indications of shade? And I think I'll find my way there little by little. But this is not going to be the last thing that I do in terms of trying to make this area over here look more and more 3D. Far from it. I will be coming in later with my trusty black Prismacolor, and probably just every different art supply that I can lay my hands on that allow me, you know, that will allow me to make this look increasingly three-dimensional. Hang on, that one went a little darker than I wanted there, and there's a little trick for you. I've shown it in some of my other videos, but if you get in with tissue right after you've put watercolor down, you can kind of dab it away sometimes, almost like having an eraser. Of course, it depends on the watercolor still being wet, and also the paper probably. I should say that this is Bristol board, which I use almost every week for these videos. It's a kind of a cardstock, you know, it's quite thick, and I find that it's almost essential when I'm doing watercolor to have some sort of thick piece of paper. We've probably all had that experience of trying to do watercolor on a thin piece of paper, and then it gets all wrinkly, and even after it has dried out, it never gets flat again. And so I highly recommend using Bristol board or some sort of thicker piece of paper before attempting watercolors. Anyway, I just wanted to sort of explain what I'm doing with this secondary layer here. I think it is probably best for me to go ahead and keep things in time-lapse. And my approach is to do almost as much as I can in watercolor, get it as 3D looking as I can, and then start to bring out some of these other tools like the black colored pencil to refine things even further. So let's go ahead. I'm going to finish off this kind of second layer, what you might call the detail layer of my watercolors. Alright, now I could certainly continue working on this with watercolor, and I will probably add more watercolor as we go, but I wanted to kind of come back with the black colored pencil here and begin to address this transition between the two different illustration styles. Now what happens with black colored pencil is that the line work becomes, you know, it's a little softer. It doesn't have that hard edge that ink does, and I thought that this would be a good thing to do, to kind of come in here where it is transitioning from ink to sort of non-linear work, and maybe have just a brief area where there's a little bit of line work, but it's like softer line work than the ink was providing, and then that might gently have, you know, gently allow me to move from one style to the other. One thing that you have to pay attention to in terms of making something look three-dimensional is thinking about your light source. You know, if the light is coming from above, you definitely don't want to start getting lines up here that outline this upper edge. You want to keep that sort of undelineated, I guess I would say. But these lower areas, because they are going to be in shade, I feel like I can go in and sort of put some lines in here. You can see already that this area, just with the watercolor alone, is starting to pop off the page a little. But we're not done. My goal really is to try to make this almost fool the eye, as I was saying before, something really that looks truly 3D. And those of you who've seen my videos, you've seen me use white gouache, my beloved white gouache. That'll definitely be coming in, probably one of the last things. that I'm going to do. But I wanted to show you my approach here with the black colored pencil. Very tentative, maybe more tentative than I normally do. I want to be very careful not to overdo it and to let most of this area of the illustration be defined by the colors, the tones, the shading, rather than by line work. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it back into time-lapse and finish up this colored pencil area. And maybe I'll even start to get to the realm of doing a drop shadow, which is really going to add to the effect of it popping off the page. But I think I'll save that for my next time, where I come back and narrate things a little bit. So let's go ahead and finish up this black colored pencil part of the process. Okay, so it's time now to add a bit of a drop shadow. I thought I'd do a little of this in real time. It's such a simple thing, putting in a bold black drop shadow, but it's kind of amazing how big of an effect it has in terms of making this pop off the page appear more solid and three-dimensional. And I am, it's pretty rare for me to go in so bold and black right from the get-go, but with this, in the case of this drop shadow, I can feel very confident that we need bold blackness right along the edge. Now, again, so long as you understand your light source coming from above and how it would cast all its shadows here on the lower right-hand side, let's say, then you can dispense with the gradual build-up and just go straight to jet black in this contained little area right along the edge. Of course, there's nothing wrong with taking your time and building it up slowly, but I just thought I'd explain why it was that you don't normally see me go in so bold and black. So yeah, that's about all I needed to say about that. I thought I would do just a little touch of it real time. Let's go ahead and finish up the drop shadow, and then I'm going to be back to maybe add just a little more refinement with watercolor, possibly other tools, before we bring out the beloved white gouache. Okay, well, it's still a little bit impressionist. I suppose if I really wanted to, I could tighten this up more and more until it genuinely looked almost photoreal. But you know what? It's been a long morning to early afternoon. I think I'm ready to wrap this up. Now I'm going to bring out my beloved white gouache and add a few highlights. Please note that I have diluted this paint a little bit with water to get it to the right consistency. There's no real rules on how much water you need to add. You sort of, it's trial and error. You add a little bit and then you try it out on maybe a scrap piece of paper, and then you find out what works for you as the sort of ideal mix of water and gouache. And you can see as I add this on, it creates this illusion of highlights, which I would say in coordination with the drop shadow. Those two together are the heavy lifters in terms of giving the illusion of three-dimensionality. Just something about that combination of a drop shadow and these little glints of white light really signals to the human eye that this object has solidity to it, that it is reacting to actual light. And one thing that helps, and I don't know if I've ever talked about this in my videos, but the lamp that is illuminating this page is over here to the upper left, and that's why I consistently do use that as the light source of my illustration, because it adds to the illusion. I mean, you see the light on my reacting to my hand and you sort of understand that that's where the light source is. And if I were fighting against that and having the light source on the upper right or the lower right or something like that, then those two things would be a little bit at war with each other. You would still have a good effect, but it's not. This adds to that feeling of, wow, it looks like I could just reach out there and touch it, you know. Well, I am going to go ahead and use Old Man Time Lapse one more time to help me speed through this last part of the video, and then we will be back with a few final words. All right, well, that brings us to the end of this video. Many thanks to anyone who decides to do a 2D becoming 3D challenge video. Remember, it doesn't have to be the same drawing materials that I've done. You could use markers instead of watercolors. You could do it digitally if you want to. Just make sure that one part of it seems very flat and the other part seems 3D. In fact, I would say make sure you don't do a dragon, because that's exactly what I did. You don't want to do the same thing that I did. Choose your own subject. Make it your own, man. Don't copy Crilley. But yeah, I don't know, if you feel like doing a dragon, why not? In any case, the last thing I wanted to say, though, is that if you are left-handed, you may want to consider having the flat section be over here on the right, so that you're resting your palm over here as you reach the more labor-intensive part of the illustration. But I want to make sure that I say thank you to anyone who has helped me out by getting any of my books, like Brody's Ghosts, my graphic novel, now collected into a single volume. We've got the drawing lesson, my graphic novel that teaches you how to draw. Also, The Realism Challenge, my book on hyper-realistic illustrations, and my very latest book, Mastering Manga 3. I really cannot express how grateful I am to all of you out there who have chosen to support me by getting any of those books. But let's go ahead and lay down this pencil. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one real soon.